Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Tipsy Goat. My name is Edwin and today I'm helping you choose a commander from the Final Fantasy set. Not all the cards have been released yet, so at the moment there are only, and I'm saying only not because it's few commanders, we're still lacking some. At the moment we have 91 commanders. As you'll see, not all of them are true commanders. Some of them are just there as iconic characters to be used during the draft. I have categorized all the legendary creatures, so you can just choose which category you like. You'll see them timestamps below as well. First off, we're starting with Aristocrats, and the first is a Judge. He says whenever another creature artifact dies, put a +1/+1 counter on the Magister. This one doesn't have the biggest payoff, but there are a lot of payoffs to be found when building a big commander. Second is Sephiroth, that is a Blood Artist that also draws you some cards. And whenever the fourth creature dies, he transforms in the one-winged angel, which draws you more cards and gives you an emblem of the Blood Artist. So if you can transform it multiple times, you have multiple Blood Artist emblems just with your commander. And the final Aristocrat commander is Squallseed Mercenary. We have two true commanders that care about artifacts in Edgar. When it ends, draw a card for each artifact you control. In blue, of course, you have a lot of blink, so you can draw a lot of cards. And he cares about winning coin flips as well. Noctis in Esper colors says whenever you cast artifact spells, Noctis lets you cast artifact spells from your grave. So you can go for the cheap artifact route, or you can go for the artifact creatures like the 40k commanders did. We only have one true burn commander. Lightning Army of One says whenever you deals combat damage to a player until your next turn, if a source will deal damage to that player or a permanent, it deals double that damage instead. We know this in mono red colors, and we have some in Boros, but not a damage doubler yet. Red gives you a lot of impact tremors and goblin bombardment triggers, and white gives you a lot of tokens. We only have one true colorless commander in Ultima Origin of Oblivion. Whenever you tap a land for colors, add an additional colorless. Of course, all the Eldrazi are pretty high on CMC, so let's say something is 12 mana. Ultima basically makes it only 6 mana. So if you do have 12 mana, now you can double cast Eldrazi's in one single turn. Pretty cool. We also have 5 commanders that are true control commanders. Well, at least the front says you can still make it mid-range or make it aggro, but they will make sure that once your commander hits the battlefield, your opponents will be down on resources or just unable to kill you, like this absolute virtue. Can't be countered, 8/8 flyer, protection from each of your opponents, jamming in a lot of life gain, and they will not be able to touch you. And once you hit your commander, you will just win by finding your infinite combo or by your opponents no longer wanting to play with you, which is the usual Ors of Control win con. Next we have Omega Heartless Evolution. When enters, for each opponent, tap up to one target non-land permanent, put X stun counters on each of those permanents, you gain X life for X number of non-basic lands you control. So once it comes down, you will play a lot of non-basic lands, giving you a lot of utility, adding to your control, and putting a lot of stun counters on the biggest threats out there. And once you start blinking this thing, things will really get nuts. Sephiroth is the kind of control that you would expect in mono black, because when it enters, creature opponents control get -2/-2, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Sephiroth. And of course, the reason you're going to build this deck is just Sephiroth and all his flavor in all of the games, because this card is a bit mediocre, but of course you can add a lot of the Edict's effect, making your opponents lose a bunch of life. It already has vigilance, so you will always have a good blocker. Give it menace, give it unblockable, and you can just swing with your commander for commander damage. Of course, if we're talking control, there has to be a mono blue deck. Ultimacia Temporal Threat says when enters, tap all creatures your opponents control, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So we already know the tap theme in Orzhov. Now we have one in blue as well. So play all the enchantments that draw you a card whenever you do combat damage. So just one 1/1 flyer will now draw you 3 cards, double it with the various agents inside to draw 6 cards, and back it up by blinking your commander whenever your opponents try to kill you by tapping all their creatures down. And soon enough, you'll just be able to win with a Labman the true way without cheating it. We also have a mono black commander for just 5 black, you get a 5/5 indestructible god. When enters, each player sacrifices half the non-god creatures they control, rounded down. Whenever a player sacrifices another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on Zodiark. So this one is a bit of an aristocrat as well, because it wants to see creature sacrificed, give this man god menace and infect all this stuff as well. Unfortunately, you cannot build this on a god team because black, besides Zodiark, only has 8 other black gods. So it's just an aristocrat deck that wants to swing with Zodiark. In other good news, green has gotten a counters commander. We already have Bristly Bill, and now we have Sas Katsuroi. When enters, you can search your library for a bird or basic land, review it, put it into your hand, and whenever attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, then double the number of +1/+1 counters on that creature. So remember that forgotten ancient? Well, he's no longer forgotten, because if he's already a 16/16, you'll now make it a 17/17 into 34/34, only give it trap, and all of your creatures that give counters to themselves will now be huge threats. On other bad news, we have 2 new curses or give your stuff away decks. The first is Stiltskin Moogle Merchant, a 1-mana white commander. You can pay 2 and tap it to give opponent another target permanent you control, and if they do, you draw a card. So give them all of the curses, all of the colorless creatures with drawbacks. We've seen it before, but trying to do it in a monocolor deck has its own challenges. Zidane or Zinedine Zidane, Tantalus Thief, says when it enters, gain control of target creature an opponent controls until end of turn. Untap it, it gains lifelink and haste until end of turn, and whenever an opponent gains control of a permanent you control, you create a treasure token. You can also play it like Stiltskin, giving all of your permanents away, but Zinedine Zidane doesn't give permanents, so you might want to do it with the old theft deck. So all of the cards that say gain control of target creature and opponent control until end of turn will now reward you a treasure token as well. If you like to play target but you no longer do because they hated your commander, why not try out Yek, Reluctant Guardian. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, exile it and transform it. He has 2 steps where each opponent discards a card and you draw a card, and finally each opponent sacrifices 2 creatures of their choice. So this one doesn't reward you for opponents discarding, but it just lets you slap with a 7/7 mana creature for 2 turns if you can give it haste, or just for 1 turn. And my favorite commander of this set, Kefka Court Mage. When enters or attacks, each player discards a card and draw a card for each card type among cards discarded this way. He also says pay 8, each opponent sacrifices a permanent of their choice, and then transform Kefka to make it a Avatar Wizard that says whenever an opponent loses life during your turn, you draw that many cards. So blink it a couple of times so your opponents don't have a lot of cards in their hand, but I find that way really mean. So I made a DeckTech on how to play it like a Nekasar deck, and finally win with a infinite combo, drawing your deck, pinging whenever you draw. We have 1 new Enchantments commander, which is very popular. Yuna, Hope of Spyra, says during your turn, Yuna and enchantment creatures you control have trample, lifelink and ward 2. And at the beginning of your end step, return up to 1 target enchantment card. It doesn't say enchantment creature from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So you can build it the enchantment creature route, giving all your enchantment creatures trample, lifelink, ward 2, or you can make it the saga route, which in Celestia isn't the best, but it's still fun to do. But I am really curious to see what kind of cool enchantment creatures you can play in Celestia. We have gotten quite some new equipment commanders. First, Cloud Midgar Mercenary. When enters, tutor a equipment card, and as long as Cloud is equipped, if an ability of Cloud or an equipment attached to it triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. We all love double triggers, and Cloud gets to do it. All the swords, all kinds of shenanigans you can do with equipment will now be doubled, because basically every equipment is colorless. You don't really care about it being monocolored. There's a lot of fun to make here. Cloud Planet's Champion has double strike and indestructible during your turn, and says equip abilities you activate that target Cloud cost 2 less to activate. So every equipment that has equipped 2 or less is now free to equip. So if you have 5 equipments laying around, your Cloud was just destroyed, but you have 7 mana again. Give it a Swiftfoot Boots that is free to equip, and 4 others that makes Cloud pretty big, and hopefully give him trample. Now you have double strike, haste, trample, indestructible, all of the good stuff, and Cloud will keep on coming as long as those equipment stick. Varian is pretty close to Cloud because he says equipped creatures you control have haste, and whenever a non-token equipment enters, create a token that's a copy of it, except it has this equipped abilities cost 2 less to activate, and sacrifice it at the beginning of the next upkeep. So if you make a Swiffer Boots, now you have 2, and the token you can equip for free. So pretty close to Planet's Champion, but only 3 mana instead of 5, and more explosive because of the double equipments going on. Now, even more explosive is Gilgamesh Mastered Arms. When it enters or attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library, put any number of equipment cards from among them onto the battlefield, put the rest on the bottom of your library, and when you put 1 or more equipment onto the battlefield this way, attach one of them to a samurai you control. Pretty straightforward, but has a way to cheat the equipment costs. So my favorite equipment card, Colossus Hammer, will now instantly be attached to Gilgamesh if there is a trample and haste there as well. Yeah, you know the drill. You now have at least a 16/16 haste, double strike, trampler, hexproof, whatever. It can go nuts. One that barely made the cut, Cypher Almacy, a 4 mana commander that says whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gains double strike until end of turn, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. So give this man trample, and then now you have a trample double striker, and if he connects twice, you can cast an instant or sorcery card with mana value 3 or less twice for free. So a lot of removal, card draw, ramp, all from your commander. Another pretty cool mono blue commander, Ishtola Rule. At the beginning of your end step, exile target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Then if it's the first end step, there's an additional end step. So you get to blink something twice, and all the things happening at your end step will now be doubled. So if you put a counter from something or onto something at your end step, if you make additional tokens at your end step, all of it will be doubled. And of course you get to blink 2 creatures. Landfall fans, be rejoiced. There are 3 new Landfall creatures. Well, there are a lot, but just 3 that are good enough to be your commander. Joko, Seeker of Paradise, says whenever 1 or more birds you control attack, look at the many cards from the top of your library. Put 1 of them into your hand, then put any number of land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest into your grave. It also has Landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, Joko gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So attack with 4 birds, put 1 of the 4 cards into your hand. So attack with 4 birds, look at 4 cards, and 1 of them into your hand. All the lands go onto the battlefield and the rest goes into your graveyard. You are in exactly the perfect colors for the birds Typal, which of course isn't a coincidence because everyone will want to build Joko, and this commander is the perfect bird commander. Gladiolus Amicitia is a bit tougher. When he enters, search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield, tap that shovel, and whenever a land you control enters, another target creature you control gets +2 and trample until end of turn. So have all the landfall triggers that make a lot of power. Make this guy come back a couple of times to tutor out any card, so you can get all the Tron cards, so you can get all the Tron lands, you can get a lot of shenanigans with lands, and a lot of shenanigans with just big dumb creatures. Or another creature that cares about landfall is Tifa Lockhart. Whenever a land you control enters, double Tifa Lockhart's power until end of turn. If you have Gladiolus out already, play Tifa, pretty cool. But if Tifa is your commander, yeah, you're gonna build it a Voltron landfall, which I think is a first, so it might be fun to try this one out. We also have a new commander for the legendary matters type, to be specific legendary creatures, because Sarah Farron says the first legendary creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 2 or more legendary creatures, you may transform Sarah, and it now is a anthem that says legendary creature you control get +2/+2. So of course he wants legendary creatures, but you can make it humans, which is pretty strong as Celestia. You can make it gods, quite a few Typal to be chosen among legendary creatures. We also have for white 3 new Lifegain commanders. The first is Aaron Gainsborough, a 3 mana commander whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on Aerith, and when Aerith dies, put X +1/+1 counter on each legendary creature you control, where X is the number of counters on. No coincidence as well that she is white, so there is a legendary matters in Celestia going on, and yeah, this one just wants all the life gain triggers, all the legendary creatures, so legendary life gain creatures would be fun to find out. In Azure, we also have a life gain commander at the beginning of your end step. Each opponent mills X, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. While you're in blue, you can also play a lot of instant from your opponent's graveyards. So have some mill triggers, have some lifelink triggers, and play some stuff from your opponent's graveyard. Seems like a pretty good plan. Rosa Resolute White Mage says at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target control, and it gives lifelink until end of turn. This one gives the least payoff. It just wants a Voltron creature to go tall, give it a counter and give it lifelink to make sure you gain tons of life every single turn. Cecil does it the complete other way, because whenever Cecil deals damage, you lose that much life, and if your life total is less than or equal to half your starting life total, you can untap Cecil and transform it. Then you get Cecil Redeemed Paladin, and whenever he attacks, other attacking creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. So there's a lot of ways to build. It says other attacking creatures, so you want to go white possibly, or you want to force combat because you have indestructible, so make sure they fight and ping some stuff, remove some stuff. Lots of ways to go there. Blue, of course, does some shenanigans, so this is a combined category. Gogo Master of Mimicry says XX and tap. Copy target activated or triggered ability you control X times. You may choose new targets for the copies. This is probably a better card in the 99, because if your commander has a good activated or triggered ability, you can now copy it multiple times. But build it as a commander, play it with a lot of ramp, and yeah, copy some activated or triggered abilities a lot of times, gaining you probably more mana, more card draw, and a lot of bounces probably as well. Jill likes to do some shenanigan as well. Jill, Shiva's Dominant, says when she enters, return up to one other target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Then you get to pay 5, tap it, exile, and Transformer, which says at chapters 1 and 2, target creature can't be blocked this turn. And finally, tap all lands your opponent's control and then blink it again. So this is a control commander as well that bounces something, then taps a lot of stuff and bounces something again. Honestly, I wouldn't want to build this because it seems very annoying to play against. But if you are a true blue mage, you don't care about being annoying. This is what you like to do. Now we have another champion that cares about scry or surveil, because Matoya Archon Elder says whenever you scry or surveil, draw a card, and you are in the perfect colors to do so. With the Assassin's Creed set, I only built one deck that I really loved, and it was Cleopatra, that gave you cards for the amount of counters on legendary creatures, and Unova Ancient Calamity is pretty close to doing so. She says at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to Unova's power on up to one other target creature. That creature becomes a mutant in addition, and whenever a mutant you control dies during your turn, you draw cards equal to its power. So buff Genova by giving her counters, by equipping her with some big equipments, find some mutants that are mutants by itself, add some cards that give all your creatures all creature types to make all your creatures mutants, and play a board wipe, draw a lot of cards, make sure you don't have a maximum hand size so you can discard all your best creature cards, get all your creature cards back by doing some shenanigans like the Rise of the Dark Realms, or just reanimating them one by one, and you have the very grindy game plan that Golgari just loves so very much. Now talking about recursion, Emmett Selch says whenever it enters or attacks, draw a card, then discard the card, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 14 or more cards in your graveyard, you may transform Emmett Selch into Hades, Sorcerer of Eld, a 6/6 avatar with vigilance. During your turn, you may play cards from your graveyard, and if a card or token will be put into your graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So all the 14 or more cards that were already in your graveyard, you can now just play them by paying their normal costs. But if something comes in your graveyard, it will be exiled, basically like a Yawgmoth's will. So play all the cards in your graveyard that you want to see an additional time, then make sure you get to flip Hades to the other side, maybe by playing a board wipe, then casting your commander again, and do all this shenanigans again when you have 14 or more cards in your graveyard again. So you probably want some mill and reanimate, but you can also just build it a Typal deck or anything that you really like in Dimir colors. Fang Fearless Ici is one of the 2 cards to melt. She says whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. This ability triggers only once each turn. She melts with Vanilla, which we'll see here as well. Vanilla says when enters mill 2, then return a permanent card from your graveyard to your hand, and at the beginning of your first main phase, if you both own and control Vanilla and a creature named Fang Fearless Ici, you may pay 5 mana. If you do, exile them, then melt into Ragnarok Divine Deliverance, which is a 7/6 Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, Haste. Whenever it dies, destroy target permanent and return target non-legendary permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So the 2 cards that you needed to melt will not be able to return to the battlefield, but of course you're in Golgari colors, so you can probably do it again. But yeah, a 7/6 Vigilance, Menace, Trample, Reach, Haste is nothing to write home about. We also have Joshua Phoenix's Dominant. When enters, discard up to 2, then draw that many cards, and by paying 5 and tapping it, you can transform Joshua into Phoenix Warden of Fire. Chapters 1 and 2, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. And finally at chapter 3, you can return any number of target creature cards with total mana value 6 or less from your grave to the battlefield, and then you get to exile Phoenix. And on chapters 1 and 2, it is a flying lifelinker, so it will deal 6 damage to opponents, and you will gain 6 life. So on chapters 1 and 2 you would just gain 12 life, which is pretty good for your commander, because you will want to do this multiple times in a single game. But of course, number 3, you can return any number of target creature cards with total mana value 6 or less, so you might want to have a really low curve or a lot of cards with mana value 5 or 6. Sin says whenever it attacks or enters, exile a permanent card from your graveyard at random, then create a tap token that's a copy of that land card. If the exiled card is a land card, repeat this process. So you might want to build a Landfall deck, because yeah, you will exile all the land cards from your graveyard if there are only land cards. So make sure to exile any card from your graveyard that is not a land card, and whenever Sin enters or attacks, you get to exile all your land cards. Have some cards that make sure that your land cards don't enter tapped, have some landfall triggers, and you have a very cool landfall deck. But if you just want to cheat out some very expensive and annoying stuff, Sin is your guy as well. We have seen that Celestia is the enchantment colors. They also have a Saga commander, because Garnet, Princess of Alexandria, is a 2 mana 2/2 lifelinker, and whenever she attacks, you may remove a lore counter from each of any number of sagas you control, and you put a +1/+1 counter on Garnet for each lore counter removed this way. So if you don't want to see your sagas go, play Garnet, get all the number 1 and number 2 on your sagas once more, and yeah, just to have a lot of utility and make your opponents wait a very long time. Shantoto Dentition Magician says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, she gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X amount of mana spent. If X is 4 or more, draw a card. While give her Trample, you will have a very big card but even more fun is Tella Great Sage, a 5 mana commander. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create a colorless hero. If 4 or more mana was spent to cast a spell, draw 2 cards. If 8 or more mana was spent to cast a spell, sacrifice Tella, and it deals that much damage to each opponent. I don't think there are ways to abuse Tella by sacrificing it multiple times, because you can only sacrifice Tella once to deal that much damage to each opponent. So you might just want to finish off with a 20 mana spell like a Crackling with Power or an Epic Experiment. And of course you are gonna care about your creature tokens. Maybe give them +X/+O as well, or just sacrifice them to cast your very big spell. Izzet also gained a Transform commander in the Emperor of Palamecia. You can tap it to add blue or red. Spend this mana only to cast a non-creature spell. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana was spent to cast it, put a +1/+1 counter on this card. And if it has 3 or more counters on it, you can transform it into the Lord Master of Hell, a very epic name. Whenever it attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of non-creature non-land cards in your grave. Pretty straightforward. Cast multiple non-creature spells that cost at least 4 mana, transform it to deal a lot of damage. It doesn't give you a lot of utility because it doesn't give you a lot of mana, only 1. And it doesn't draw you cards. But if you are confident in your deck building, yeah, all you need is a card to finish it off. The Emperor of Palamecia is your card. But if you want to go big, there is, of course, Vivi Ornithier. Ornithier, whatever. It says pay 0 to add X mana in any combination of blue and a red, where X is Vivi's power. Activate only during your turn and only once each turn. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Vivi and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So cast 4 cantrips. You now gained 4 counters on Vivi. It also deals 4 damage to each opponent, and you can now activate its ability to make 4 mana. It needs quite a setup because it needs a lot of power, so a lot of cantrips. And cantrips, of course, already cost mana. But yeah, if you have the right setup, you can get a lot of mana by activating Orni, maybe blink it and cast a lot of spells again. So you can activate the ability again. And if you can find a Curiosity, enchant it on Vivi, it will now draw you 3 cards whenever you cast a non-creature spell, because it dealt 1 damage to each opponent. And yeah, Vivi gives you all the mana and now also gives you all the cards. Insane. We even have 4 more cards that transform. When we're at Clive, says when it enters you may discard your hand, then draw cards equal to your devotion, so at least 2, because Clive has 2 red pips. And you can pay 6 and tap Clive to transform it into Ifrit, Warden of Inferno. Ifrit fights up to 1 other target creature on the first step, and on the second and third steps it gives 4 red mana. So if you transform it back into Clive, you can discard your hand and draw cards again. You already have 3 mana, so you need an additional 3 and haste to instantly transform it again. And well, 3 mana is not that much because you were already able to cast its front side. So yeah, you can loop Clive pretty often. Another really awesome transform card, Ultimacia Time Sorceress, a 5 mana Dimir commander. When enters or attacks, Servile 2. And at the beginning of your end step, you may pay 4 and double blue, double black, so 8 mana, and exile 8 cards from your graveyard. If you do, transform Ultimacia, which is a 7/7 menace creature, and when it transforms into... Yeah, I'm gonna take an extra turn after this one. Very cool. Then we have another mono black transform commander in Vincent Valentine, which is a 4 mana 2/2 assassin. Whenever a creature an opponent controlled dies, put a number of +1/+1 counter on Vincent Valentine equal to that creature's power. And whenever Vincent attacks, you may transform it into the Galleon Beast. It doesn't say exile it and then transform it, it just says transform it. So if it's seen 1 upkeep, it now doesn't have summoning sickness, and it's a 3/2 trample lifelinker with, of course, all the counters. And when Galleon Beast dies, you return it to the battlefield tapped with the front face up. Another black commander that likes to go all in is Xenos Galvus. When enters, choose a creature an opponent controls until end of turn. Creatures other than Xenos and the chosen creature get -2/-2. And when the chosen creature leaves the battlefield, you transform Xenos into Shinryu Transcendent Rival. It's an 8/8 flyer. As this creature transforms into Shinryu, choose an opponent. When the chosen player loses the game, you win the game. And this one also doesn't say exile. So you choose 1 creature, and on your next turn, you destroy that creature to get an 8/8 flyer. And hopefully the 8/8 flyer will be enough to win you the game. It's a very controlly deck because you will just pack 20-25 pieces of removal and make sure you will be alive until the very few last turns, and yeah, just knock 1 player out when they're not expecting it, transform it into Shinryu and kick them out of the game, winning you the game. When I just started playing Commander, all I did was make Typal decks, or tribal decks as they were called back then, and luckily this set has gotten new tribal commanders as well. Arden the Usurper is a 8 mana black commander that says demons you control have menace, lifelink and haste. That is quite a lot. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, exile up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard. If you exile a card this way, create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 5/5 black demon, so it can be any card, so it can be any card that now also has menace haste. Black Waltz number 3 is a 4 mana Rakdos commander that has flying and death touch, and whenever you cast a non-creature, Black Waltz deals 2 damage to each opponent, which isn't all that powerful. But we have cool Genome Sorcery that says at the beginning of your end step, create a tapped 0/1 Black Wizard creature token. With whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each each opponent. And if you control 4 or more wizards, you can transform Kuya into Trans Kuya Fate Divide. If a wizard you control will deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage. Instead, do keep in mind that it deals double damage to you as well. It doesn't say permanent or player an opponent controls, but yeah, of course, all your wizards will ping. So you will now have double the ping, double the madness. We've gotten another commander in Dion Bahamut's Dominant. During your turn, Dion and other knights you control have flying, and when Dion enters, you create a 2/2 White Knight creature token, which is pretty cool because Dion can transform by paying 6 and tapping it into Bahamut Horn of Light. Put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. Those gain flying until end of turn. And at 3, you destroy target permanent and you transform it back into Dion, gaining you another White Knight creature token. Dwarves have gotten a pretty cool commander in Giot, King of the Dwarves, which is a 2-mana Boros commander, a 1/1 Dwarf Noble with double strike, and whenever Giot or another Dwarf you control enters, and whenever an equipment you control enters, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So back in the days, dwarves and equipment, or dwarves and vehicles, were a thing, and equipment is still very good. Dwarves are pretty cool, not the best, but just so flavorful to build around, and Giot really rewards you for it by looting whenever one of them enters. Another Typal that doesn't have that many cards and commanders are clerics. Minmu White Mage is a 5-mana human cleric with Vigilance and Lifelink, and whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on each cleric you control. And of course, clerics care all about a life gain. So play a lot of clerics, gain a lot of life. Usually they give you stuff like extra angels or extra life gain, extra power and toughness, all this cool shenanigans. So this deck really will build itself by just including the best clerics. And the last Typal commander cares about scouts, pirates and the rogues, because Van Street Thief says whenever one of those creature types you control deal combat damage to a player, exile the top card of that player's library. You may cast it. If you don't, create a treasure token. So whenever you exile a card from your opponent's library, you now have a choice. Cast it by paying its mana cost, or create a treasure token. And whenever you cast a spell you don't own, put a +1/+1 counter on each scout, pirate and rogue you control. Being a mono red commander, it's quite challenging. Exiling the top card and not being able to pay with any color of mana makes it quite challenging, because you will need a lot of treasure tokens, but luckily red gives you a lot of treasure tokens, so build those Typals and a lot of treasure tokens, and you will be rewarded by putting a +1/+1 counter on all of your creatures. Sounds very fun to me. Now we also gained a vehicle deck in what to me sounded like a very odd color, because Baltir and Vran are a 3-mana commander in the Gru colors, and says vehicles you control get +1/+1 vigilance and reach, and whenever a vehicle crewed by Baltir and Vran this turn attacks, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, you may pay 1 and Gru. If you do, after this phase there's an additional combat phase. Gru likes to smash, vehicles like to ride. Combine it and you smash while you ride. This set also gained us a new Karn the Betrayer, but this time in black, because Kane Traitorous Dragoon is a 3-mana 2/4 human knight, and during your turn Kane has flying, so it will basically always connect, and whenever Kane deals combat damage to a player, that player gains control of Kane. If you do, you draw that many cards, create that many tapped treasure tokens, then lose that much life. So Karn was a bit easier to build, because Karn will just be sacrificed whenever it deals damage, and whenever it dies you can give it to someone. So Kane need to be goaded to make sure it will always attack. You will have to find some ways so it can't be destroyed or sacrificed, and of course you want to be a Voltron commander by just making it very tall, slapping your opponents around and hoping Kane doesn't kill you. Still in the Typal category we have Torgal, a fine hunt, which, well, yeah, looks like a fine hunt. Whenever you cast your first human creature spell each turn, that creature enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it for each dog and or wolf you control, and you can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. So originally I thought it would be a werewolf deck, because, well, werewolves are humans at the front, but they aren't dogs or wolves at the back. So I haven't figured this one out, and I am really curious to see if it really works, because, well, of course, Selesnya has a lot of humans, and a lot of those humans will be in green, but the best one will be Selesnya or white. So I am not sure how many humans, dogs and wolves you can find, but I bet someone will crack it and will have a lot of fun doing it. So then we have a lot of legendary creatures that you will be seeing in your draft, but just not good enough to build around. I have noted 31 of those. All of those cards will care about one of the archetypes. Maybe they're already 2 colors or they're 1 color in their specific archetype. Bert Steiner cares about equipment. So Whiteheart is a landfall bird, just like Chocobo. Ash cares about artifacts, probably in the Orsov colors. Barrett Wallace cares about equipment. Bart cares about the birds. Beatrix is pretty good in the equipment theme, but Ardennes is just way better. It is pretty cool because a deck can have any number of cards named Sid, but he's just not very strong. Cloud of Darkness is removal indigo package that cares about cards in the graveyard. Diamond Weapon, also a part of Golgari. Freya cares about equipment. Gaius van Balser is removal on its own, probably in the Orzhov colors. Garland cares about casting non-creature spells like Postdues with all the wizards. Tia says whenever you sacrifice a artifact or creature, you draw a card, only once each turn. Of course, the Simic stuff cares about land drops. Lightning would be pretty cool if all your creatures could exile, but unfortunately only Lightning does, so not a very good card, but probably good in your Boros equipment decks. Lock in Dimir colors does stuff in the Izzet colors or in the Rakdos colors. Queen gives you wizards, mainly for the Rakdos colors. Quina gives you frogs. Quistis Trepe lets you recur an instant or sorcery. Raban is pretty cool for the Boros equipment. Reno and Root gives you some value in Orsov. Renoya heartily lets you go white with a Selesnya build. Rufus Shinida. Whenever it attacks, you create Darkstar, which is a legendary dog creature token, which you then sacrifice in the Orzhov colors. Saber Flux, just a good black spell. Draw a card each turn. Snow Villiers go white with white. Titus wants you to play artifacts. Now, one of the cards I did doubt about is Ultros Obnoxious Octopus, because this one is actually pretty cool. For 2 mana, you have an octopus. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana was spent to cast it, tap target creature an opponent controls, put a stun counter on it. That's alright. But whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 8 mana was spent to cast, put 8 +1/+1 counters on Ultos. And well, we have Delve cards. We have Delve cards. We have a lot of ways to actually cheat, even in mono blue. So you can make it pretty big while stunning some of your creatures. I mean, yeah, doing it 3 times is 24 power, making it a 26, 25. Yeah, it does sound pretty cool, but of course you will need to be able to spend 8 mana on non-creature spells quite a lot of times, and well, you're in blue, so you do have some protection, so it might be cool, but it also just might be too much work. Xande, Dark Mage. We also have a card in Dimir that cares about your graveyard. A Sackfair in the Boros, and Zeldinched in the Gru that wants to slap. So there you have it, 91 cards, all put into categories. If you want to browse it, of course, I have left the link below in the description. For now, I would like to thank you for your time and see you on the next one.